Andor accomplishes something that is in fact brilliant, and I believe is the key to the future of Star Wars. But with low viewership and some in the fan base saying that it's not Star Wars, this has caused them to miss out on the true brilliance of Andor. I'm going to show you just how important Andor is to the future of Star Wars, even though it does depart from some of the Star Wars tropes. It nails the true heart of the franchise. But it also leaves some of us wondering if any of it matters at all. How's it going? Welcome to the Force Fandom. My name is Jeremy, and this is a channel for regular fans who love Star Wars. And if you ask any of those regular fans about why they love Star Wars, you're going to get the same answer. No, it's not going to be about the humor and the jokes that Star Wars brings, though. It can be pretty funny. And no, it's not the cool lightsaber duels or the maybe sometimes predictable plot. Everyone will say the same thing. It's the characters. It's Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and so on. The characters are the true heart of Star Wars. But more on that in a minute. Because before we can go into that, we have to talk about the giant elephant in the room concerning Andor, and it's what I like to call the slow burn. Andor is not a thrill ride from beginning to end. It's not going to go from big sequence to big sequence to keep you gripped in. It's not going to rely on all of these action sequences or this nostalgia or all of the other things that the sequel trilogy tried to rely on to keep your attention. Instead, this is much like great barbecue. It's the low and slow approach. It creeps up on you. It's planned out. It's methodical. And then when it finally hits, it's perfect. It's exactly what you wanted it to be. This is a departure from what we've seen in some of Star Wars, but I think it's a much needed one, and it's one that I think is only going to help the future of the franchise. It's a plan and a process geared towards methodical storytelling, structuring your story in such a way that's going to keep the audience moving closer and closer, leaning in, being surprised, wanting more. It's the setup and payoff again and again and again, and it's not leaning on all of these tropes that Star Wars fans have come to love, but it's going to bring you on a journey that is going to not only tug at your heart, but also get you thinking. And that's some of the things I love most about the original trilogy. Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, Return of the Jedi. They all bring in these deeper meanings and thought processes woven into the story exactly like Andor does. But how does this come about? How does it all fit together? It's the characters. And this is exactly what happens in Star Wars. Every single great Star Wars show or movie, it's all about the characters and what they do. When you first fell in love with Star Wars, it was because you felt something. You connected in some way to Luke Skywalker or Leia, or you wanted to see how this journey played out between Luke and his father, and so you were hooked. And so the plan of the story methodically got you from place to place, bringing you deeper into what is this slow burn. But Andor isn't just about the characters. It's more than that. It's not just a slow burn, methodical storytelling. It's also a new perspective that we haven't really looked into in the Star Wars universe. And this is something that I think the future of Star Wars needs to understand. That we're looking at the events of what's led up to the rebellion from the ground up. We even see it in the camera angles, in the cinematography, particularly when the TIE fighter is flying over the camp. You feel so small and helpless as you can hear the sound of the TIE fighter before you can see it. And it all just makes you realize that this grassroots rebellion is dealing with this giant empire, and you're brought into the story in a beautiful way. It's an angle of the story, quite literally, an angle of the story that has not been explored. But yet it stays true to what Star Wars is. It does not break lore. It does not break the world. It adds to all that we already have while taking a different perspective. But that different perspective isn't about rewriting the history books or rewriting what we've known Star Wars to be. It's instead taking these little characters in their day-to-day life in this political struggle that would have been the Empire versus the Rebellion, and it gives life to it. It puts flesh and blood to it. We see people like Marva and Brasso and Bix. These are the characters that start the rebellion. We see the character of Ferrix itself, a town and a world and a city that stand up to fight. And it's these types of perspectives that I think have to come to the Star Wars universe, but in a way that is not intended to change what has been. There wasn't a moment when I was watching Andor that I didn't feel like this was real. Now, it even got to the point where you're using things that I would recognize today, and they were being used in the movie. I think the clearest example of this is in some of the weaponry we saw as they're getting ready to do the Aldhani heist. You can see these just look like guns, like we would recognize. But I think that part of that's okay. We know it's not ammunition in the same way. We're going to see them used. We're going to see how it plays out. But there's a real lived-in nature to Andor that has been lost in some of the other shows. And it's this kind of both and that when we look back at the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, I think the original trilogy did it better, that we felt like we were being pulled into this forest of Endor. We felt like we were being pulled into these scenes in the desert on Tatooine. These felt lived in. We felt like we were being pulled into Hoth in the cold, wintry temperatures, especially as I look outside and I'm like, really? Single digits again? I want this to end. But when it's all said and done, what it does, the realism of the original trilogy is really what is beautiful in Andor. The practical sets, the real things. I felt like I was on Ferrix. You cannot say that about a lot of the other, if not all, of the other things that have been produced throughout Disney Star Wars. And I think Andor does that perfectly and is a key to why Andor was so good. The final question to ask then is, can Andor be a catalyst for change? Can the beautiful, amazing notes that come out of this show actually bring about positive change in the Star Wars universe? Will Disney and Lucasfilm take note of any of this? Well, the skeptic in me wants to say, no, they're never going to listen. But the rebellion in me wants to say we need to make them listen. We need to communicate what it is we want as a fan base. And no matter where you stand on any of the other things, whether you agree or disagree with me about the sequel trilogy, whether you agree or disagree with me on my preference of not liking The Acolyte and enjoying Skeleton Crew, can we please put all of that aside and look at Andor and say, this is a catalyst for change. Can we get more Star Wars that's like this, that's character driven, that has a methodical, real, planned out and structured, amazing plot with twists and turns and surprises, but not just gimmicks and nostalgia? Can we get a story that is going to give us a perspective of Star Wars that's not just going to break lore, but instead going to pull us into this universe more deeply? And can this story be woven into and made in such a way that you're using these realistic props and real things that really make the whole thing come alive, that make the actors and actresses be able to live in the sets and act in the sets and be where they are? Can we get more of that? Can we at least agree on that? I think we can. As one who loves Star Wars and loves Andor, yes, I might be biased with this, but tell me where I'm wrong. What did I miss? Where do you think the future of Star Wars should go? Is Andor not a good model in some ways to follow? And no, I'm not saying make a clone of this, but I'm saying learn from the mistakes of the past, see what is brilliant about this, and do more things like Andor. That doesn't mean you can't include nostalgia. That doesn't mean there can't be more Star Wars tropes. But Star Wars is a much better story than its tropes, lightsabers, and goofy nostalgia gimmicks. It just is. Really, at the end of the day, unfortunately, I don't think any of this is going to matter until we as a fan base unite in this mission to communicate exactly what it is we want. So I ask you, I don't always ask this. In fact, I've never asked this before. Would you please share this video with someone? Maybe someone who enjoys Star Wars and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this guy's crazy, or is he right on with what you would want to see in the Star Wars universe? Guys, I'd appreciate that. Thanks for being here. And remember, the Force will be with you always.